In Adair County, Missouri, people are used to cornfields stretching straight to the horizon and the thunderous roar of massive tractors. Agriculture here is a story of giant machines, chemical fertilizers, and modern high-tech irrigation pipes. But in the late spring of that year, a strange sight appeared on the Parker family farm. Owen Parker, the quiet, reserved 13-year-old second son of the family, began carrying a personal set of tools out to the fields: an iron shovel borrowed from his father, a frayed canvas measuring tape, and a bundle of small, crudely whittled wooden stakes. The boy was naturally quiet and observant. He was the type who would spend hours just standing on the porch watching summer rainstorms, intensely focused on how the water rippled and carved its way through the soil after the storm cleared. Day after day, regardless of the scorching sun or biting wind, Owen trudged out to the middle of the late-planted cornfield. He measured, drove his stakes into the ground, and began to dig. The holes he dug were by no means large. Each was only about half a meter wide and 40 centimeters deep. But the strange thing was what Owen did after digging. He didn't leave them empty. He carefully lined the bottom with dry grass, scattered a layer of small pebbles, covered them with decayed leaves, and then lightly backfilled them with a bit of soil. He left these small pits scattered randomly across the field. In one day, 20 pits were born. In a week, the number exceeded 100. By the end of the summer, the Parker field looked as though it had undergone a bizarre bombardment, dotted with hundreds of small, uneven pits filled with dry grass and decaying leaves. Neighbors driving by the red dirt road bordering the farm would slow down, roll down their windows, and chuckle. "Hey, Caleb, is young Owen digging rabbit holes or setting traps for moles out there?" Caleb Parker, Owen's father, was a practical, busy, no-nonsense farmer. Standing by the fence, watching his son's small silhouette shoveling dirt in the evening sun, he sighed, walked over, and asked, "Owen, what on earth are you doing?" "These holes are just going to get in the way of my tractor." Owen didn't look up. He simply wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I'm catching the water, Dad." The secret from the previous summer. No one in the county knew the origin of this stubbornness, except for his grandfather, Henry Doyle. 78-year-old Henry was a retired water conservation specialist for the Department of Agriculture, who had spent his life studying river flows and the depletion of underground aquifers. The previous summer, during a walk through an untouched native prairie, Henry had led Owen by the hand and stopped in front of slight depressions in the ground where the grass grew thickest and greenest. He knelt down, showing the boy how rainwater pooled in these small natural hollows instead of washing away. "Look, Owen. Nature never lets water run away too fast. It always finds a way to slow it down, to make it sink in. If you ever want to save our family's fields from drought, you have to learn to hold on to every single drop before it evaporates." Those words planted a fierce, quiet belief in the 13-year-old's heart. The first planting season passed, and it seemed the skeptics were right. Owen's pits made no visible difference. When the farming season began in earnest, several holes near the rows were accidentally flattened by his father's massive tractor. Others were trampled by free-roaming cattle, and their edges collapsed into muddy ruts. Weeds began to choke the pits filled with decaying leaves, making the field look messy and neglected. Noah, Owen's older brother, leaned against the cattle pen fence, watching his younger brother struggle to clear dirt from a collapsed pit. He laughed mockingly. "Told you so, Owen. Next season, you'll have to start all over again. Those dirt holes of yours are doing nothing but feeding the weeds." One afternoon, a local agricultural extension officer stopped by the farm to check on crop pests. He stared at Owen's scattered pits, shook his head with pity, and told Caleb, "You should probably tell the boy to clear these out. They aren't doing anything except keeping the weeds hydrated." But Owen didn't argue. He just kept heading out to the fields every afternoon after school with his shovel. If a pit collapsed, he dug it out again. If cattle trampled one, he drove taller wooden stakes to market, and then dug even more in the sloped areas of the farm. Like an hourglass, he quietly measured and redirected the flow of water in his own silent way. 2 years later, that summer, Missouri was gripped by the most severe drought in 30 years. For nearly 2 months, the sky over Adair County remained relentlessly clear and baking hot, like a giant kiln. Hot winds swept in from the west, carrying away the fine topsoil. Across the valley, cornfields began to crack open with deep, jagged fissures. The ground hardened like concrete, choking out the last bits of moisture from the crop's roots. The corn withered under the baking sun before it could even tassel. Water sources dried up, and pastures burned to a crisp, forcing neighboring farms to sell off their cattle for next to nothing because they had nothing to feed them. Yet, in the middle of this barren desert, the Parker farm stood out like a strange oasis. While the Parkers' corn had lost some of its vibrant green, the stalks still stood tall, their leaves flared open to catch the sun, instead of curling up or burning at the edges. And the Parker cattle still grazed peacefully on thick patches of green grass growing between the rows. Driven by sheer curiosity, Caleb Parker grabbed a shovel and walked out into the field. He picked one of the small pits Owen had dug 2 years ago, now completely covered by a thick layer of organic mulch from decomposed grass and leaves. Caleb drove the shovel into the ground. The topsoil was dry and hot, but as the shovel blade sank about 30 centimeters deep, he froze in sheer disbelief. The soil underneath was soft, crumbly, dark brown, and radiated a cool, pleasant moisture. When he gently squeezed a handful of dirt, it easily held its shape. It turned out that for the past 2 years, Owen's hundreds of tiny pits had been working as a massive, silent underground water storage system. Whenever even the smallest rain shower occurred, instead of letting the water wash over the hard, baked clay and drain away into distant ditches, these mulch-filled pits trapped it. They acted like giant sponges, soaking up thousands of gallons of rainwater, slowing it down, and allowing it to steadily seep deep into the root zones of the corn over the dry weeks. A week later, Dr. David Mitchell, a renowned hydrologist from the University of Missouri, personally drove out to the farm after hearing reports from the extension office. He walked through the Parkers' green corn rows, kneeling to measure soil moisture and inspect the structure of the small pits. He stood up, looking at Owen with immense respect. This is a micro-catchment system, an ancient water harvesting technique used by people in the most arid regions of the world, like the Middle East and North Africa, to survive for thousands of years. But in America, we've largely forgotten it, relying instead on expensive mechanical pumps. It's absolutely remarkable that a 13-year-old boy recreated and executed this perfectly on a family farm. That autumn, while a somber mood hung over Adair County due to widespread crop failures with some farms losing over half their yield, the Parker family harvested nearly their entire crop. Truckloads of plump, golden corn continuously left the Parker farm for the processing plant. They hadn't just saved their harvest, they had also preserved their entire cattle herd without being forced to sell a single head, all thanks to the green pastures nourished by Owen's underground water reserves. The following spring, an unprecedented sight unfolded across Adair County. In the fields of the neighbors, including those who had laughed at Owen 2 years prior, there were no giant tractors running at full throttle to flatten the land. Instead, older farmers and young men alike walked out into their fields holding shovels. They drove stakes, tied string, and began digging small pits 1/2 meter wide and 40 centimeters deep, filling them with dry grass and decaying leaves, exactly the way Owen had. This water-retaining system didn't require electricity, high-pressure pumps, or expensive soil conditioner. All they needed was a steel shovel and quiet, stubborn patience. Late one afternoon, as the golden sunset stretched across the growing cornfields, Grandfather Henry stood leaning against the fence next to Owen. He looked out at the hundreds of tiny pits, sitting quietly to catch the evening dew, smiled gently, and said, "We humans always think that when we run out of water, we need to dig deeper wells or find new sources. But sometimes, the wisest thing we can do is simply stop the water we already have from running away." Years passed, and the children of Adair County grew up to farm the same land. People might have forgotten the mocking laughter and the teasing of that first summer. But everyone remembered that Adair County survived its worst droughts and completely changed the way it treated its soil and water. All because of a quiet 13-year-old boy and the tiny pits everyone once thought were meaningless.
Subscribe.